Westside Park is a relatively new installment in Atlanta's Beltline. It opened in the summer of 2021, and its man-made artistic structures combines with the unique natural geological formation found at the site of the former Bellwood Quarry to further Atlanta's reputation as the city in the forest. Despite its natural and artistic aestheticism, the construction of Westside Park and its implications for surrounding communities is brought into question. While Westside Park could be seen as a part of Atlanta's effort to greenify the city and in part to terraform its land, gentrification and continuations of historically racist practices should also be considered with heavy weight as an opposing dark underside to the park's construction. In this video, I will be attempting to answer the following question. To what extent does the urban planning and development of Westside Park and its surroundings preserve and respect the historical nature of Atlanta's African American community? As mentioned before, Westside Park was once the site of Bellwood Quarry, a convict labor camp where the laborers consisted of African American men and women. The quarry was used to produce granite for Atlanta, and much of the city's infrastructure consists of the material mined from the quarry. Working conditions were intolerable and inhumane, and workers were chained together and forced to remove granite. Many laborers eventually succumbed to the harsh conditions and would die of starvation and exhaustion. Bellwood Quarry's labor camp served as an embodiment of Jim Crow laws used to prevent African Americans from gaining the rights they were entitled to following the abolition of slavery at the end of the Civil War. Under Georgia law, prisoners could be used for forced labor, with a disproportionately large portion of prisoners being African American due to the inherent prejudice in court justice systems. Moreover, with much higher rates of convictions and disproportionately harsh punishments being handed to tried African Americans on trial for minor crimes, Bellwood Quarry consisted of solely African American laborers. As such, the use of prison labor acted as a continuation of the sentiments and principles that slavery held, despite being formally outlawed. In April of 2020, the quarry began filling with over 2 billion gallons of water from the Chattahoochee River and finished in February of 2021. The filling of the reservoir can arguably be seen as a physical act to symbolize pushing Atlanta's dark past with racially discriminatory convict labor behind in an attempt to rebrand its image through the image of environmentalism expressed through Westside Park's aesthetic. With that in mind, it is implausible to refer to Westside Park as a sole attempt to greenifying the city. Instead, it is likely an attempt to revise how Atlanta is forced to deal with its past and can be seen as the erasure of a cornerstone of African American resilience against systemic racism. Grove Park is a primarily African American neighborhood in northwest Atlanta with a rich cultural history. It is a community of interest due to its proximity to Westside Park and its risk of being inadvertently affected by the construction of the park. In fact, even before the completion of Westside Park, gentrification arguably began to sink its roots in, with Microsoft's purchase of a plot of land in Grove Park. Microsoft reportedly purchased 90 acres of land to build a new campus. However, construction for the campus never took place, and the area continues to be unused to this day. With the promise of building the campus, however, came the artificial inflation of home prices in the surrounding area of Grove Park and other historically black communities, driving many long-term residents out of their homes as they were unable to afford the rising house prices. These concerns were not foreign to perspectives outside of Westside Park's Development Council. Disagreement lied even in park planning leadership. Sociopolitical and economic issues, including rising home prices and issues regarding maintaining equitable housing standards, began to arise and cause divide within. Even with organizations that advocated for the ecological conservation aspect with Westside Park's development, they were overpowered by private firms that held the greatest voice with their investments. It's likely then that despite efforts to brand Westside Park's development as being ecologically beneficial, the driving consequence of greenifying a city is the gentrification that inevitably comes with uprooting African American communities. In February of 2020, Atlanta's mayor at the time, Keisha Lane Bottoms, decided to temporarily halt the construction of Westside Park so that urban development councils could reconsider how to maintain equitable housing development for surrounding communities' residents and to prevent rising home prices from causing gentrification. While Bottoms' moratorium on the park's development allowed for an opportunity for park developers to gain a new perspective of equity, residents' experiences differ from the idealistic vision councils and developers had. Grove Park had already seen a steadily declining black population, which can be attributed to rising home prices. Westside Park's development further catalyzed this. The idea of New Atlanta has recently arisen in tandem with new developments taking place across the city. With this, however, seems to be the idea that urban renewal is directly associated with the forced extradition of many African American residents through direct consequences that echo historic practices such as redlining, which prevented many African Americans from obtaining their necessary bank loans to purchase homes. For many black residents, the fear of being displaced by rising home prices and the false promise of having access to jobs and community assets provided by community benefits agreements, CBAs for short, is very real. CBAs are legally binding contracts that developers must follow, but have been used before to sway urban councils to begin construction. Given Atlanta's rough reputation with maintaining promises to its black communities, with Mercedes-Benz Stadium and Turner Field coming to mind, Westside Park looks to be an entity of continuity for systemic discrimination against African American individuals and communities. While intentions of nurturing ecological development have been used to advocate for the development of Westside Park, much of the incentive appears to come from an attempt to reform Atlanta's physical space and its branded reputation as a green city. The stark opposing reality shows that to a much larger extent, Westside Park is a representation of the continued practice of gentrification as an aspect of systemic racism to break apart historic African American communities and erase their history of resilience amidst historical racial injustice in the judicial sphere in periods such as the white flight of the 1950s and 60s. Today, Westside Park stands as a new addition to Atlanta's Beltline, but behind its beauty lies the disturbing undertone of continued racial discrimination against African Americans.